Okay. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and hope you all are well and enjoying the conference. So happy to have you here on my topic. I propose a question discussion basically about a recently happening situations to exchange. So the topic today is what the hack exchange, and you did it again with a smiley, and the smiley will be explained at the end, of course, of the presentation. So if I'm switching to the next part of the slides, hello, I'm Kamil. Today, I'm a principal enterprise security architect, and from my perspective, I'm trying to focus on the technology stacks, which are quite close to Microsoft recently, and recently products which Microsoft has. And at the same time, if I'm talking about my history and so on, I started to work as a typical admin, and with those cases, situations, and configurations, I started to think about and play around with hardening of OSs, especially Microsoft in this case. And mostly things which were happening were related to the hardening of Windows servers and Windows clients. And of course, next steps were to go to different servers, different aspects of technologies, and leverage that part today to the cloud. So that's why you can see me on some situations, some presentations when I'm showing topics related to hybrid cloud, cloud infrastructure, or basically, like in this case, something in a mixture of situations. So that's me. If you want to follow me on Twitter or send me a question, I did give you a private email, but I'm just wanted to say one thing. I'm only checking that email during the weekends. So if I will have anything important, that will be pushed to a weekend phrase. And based on the weekend time slots, I will try to check and reply to the answer. So quickly, if you want to ask something, Twitter, then LinkedIn probably. And of course, at the end, I'll try to check the email itself. As a Microsoft MVP, in two categories like Azure Security and today Office Apps and Services. So basically Microsoft 365, I'm trying to cover all those cases and of course guide some information to those topics as well. So with that being said, let's go to the agenda and of course talk about today's situation and cases which we have. So with the small agenda, I wanted to guide you through, first of all, telling what about what's happening differently about Exchange recently and what's happening even today. The cases which we have were related to attacks which were happening globally. That's one thing. Secondly, those were actually seen even before 2021, but the mostly seen as an effect of it was a situation when we had multiple attacks on March 2021, and that was an accumulation, of course, of situation breaches and escalation done by companies, researchers, and so on. So in general, some facts about it. So how did it start? What did it happen? And some numbers. Of course, what was the situation about? So what was the state for those attacks being able to happen? Secondly, what versions were affected? Do we have patches for them, and what was changed? Some updates on how it works on a closer look perspective. So did we have a situation to first of all, see what's happening. Secondly, how was it happening? And of course, at the end, were we able to prevent it? Today, probably yes, but in those cases, in those times, we had to rely on our solutions or our investigations. And of course, at the end, after the closer look, we'll simply have a small summary explaining how we can figure out today's situations, cases, and how we can track it. So with that small agenda, I would like to jump to this part. First of all, just like you see the dates, some articles are from April, some are from March, some even were added at the very beginning. But the case is that multiple organizations were affected by it. And well, that's an obvious thing that every kind of organization has an email server. Those email servers in most cases still are based on Microsoft Exchange as a technology solution. And based on those, of course, we are able to think about a potential vector because right now we have a known vector and a possible technology stack which is underneath it. So if we have Exchange, probably we'll have other components like IIS, Windows servers, and so on. The biggest question is, well, what version we are running on? Is it patched? And of course, all the other dependencies. So those articles which you see right now were spreading all over the internet. And for example, if I'm going to this slide, it's a screenshot, of course, of a video which was, I think, on CNN, which was rapidly spreading over the internet saying, hey, it's 30,000 organizations which were affected by Microsoft email flaw. And those times were only a glimpse of information saying and explaining how that email flow was working. But I'm just like you see, even some examples of videos over YouTube are having, like, for example, 273,000 of things. So from this perspective, it was quite a big impact over the internet. That's one. Secondly, it was affecting multiple organizations in one time. And of course, multiple sub attacks were happening in the same situation, because that was only one of the vectors which people were using to go inside the organizations uninvited. So with that being said, of course, I'll post a link to the video. I don't want to share right now because we simply don't have time for it, but it will be added to the material, of course, as well. So in general, few facts. Facts are, first of all, like that. It was a global scale. It was affecting almost everyone who was using Exchange in a specific version. From my perspective, if we're talking about Exchange in a specific version, I don't mean Exchange which was exposed to the internet. So that could be a local server which was hosted by a company, which has a well, Outlook Web Access in general enabled. Secondly, if we had a hybrid configuration, that also was affected. So every each time when we had Exchange servers exposed to the internet in some kind of a way, that brings us the case when we could be compromised by those attackers. What's the other perspective? The other perspective is that the attackers were using different techniques. One of them, for example, and it has a known CVE, was to manipulate with the authentication mechanism of Outlook Web Access. And of course, the effect of it was dropping a web shell into that organization, into that Exchange configuration files. So based on those, we were able to run as a administrator on that machine, and of course run the web shell, which was doing whatever we wanted to. All of those web shells were then explored to be a part of other vectors of attack, other backdoors, and so on and so on. But in general, the most, I think, popular attacking group which was defined with it was Hafnium. And some even guides which are over internet today are quite relying to have him as a hashtag with the reference of Exchange attacks. So in few simple words, global attack affecting almost everyone who had Exchange exposed to the internet. That's one. Secondly, dropping web shells was quite common. Those web shells were only another step in the attack which was happening, and the lateral movement was quite a lot. So with those CVEs, we have a list of them, of course, and those were identified, and then Microsoft did give a small description about how it works. Of course, there are multiple documents which are explaining those. And for example, if I'm switching back to my this one, FireEye documentation, just like you see, it's on 4th of March. You have the same list of CVEs. They are ranked as critical medium, but I'm just like you see the access vectors network. So from the perspective of Exchange attacks and so on, anything which was exposed basically was, as an Exchange of a server, was a target probably at the end. And just like you see, we even have the examples of the code. We are able to even trace the information about what the code was doing. There's a lot of even examples over GitHub repos, so I'll just simply go back to that in a moment. So what we can see, first of all, we are able to see that some of the steps of the attack were actually using the option to drop the web shell, but just as the next two cases which were happening afterwards, was, for example, modifying the membership in the administrators groups. So just like you see here, we have Exchange organization administrators. That's one. Secondly, of course, were other steps for dumping information, dumping memories, and so on and so on. But let's just simply park here and go back to the presentation, because one of them was the first on the list, was actually used for sending the arbitrary requests to use a false authentication method over OWA, so Open Web Access. And you have a description about how it was configured, how it was done. The other one, which was quite popular as well, so 57, was the deserialization vulnerability with the unified messaging service. Basically, if you will go and compare the code which was before the patches and after patching, we had an option to double check the DLLs, and one of them was actually using the base 64 encoding to save that code as well. So attackers, especially Hafnium, was using that to run the code, and on the end, of course, to run it as a system on the Exchange server itself. And we have the whole definition description also linked here, because I have multiple questions even before the session. Will I give the links? Will I give the updates? Will I give the descriptions? So it's already updated in the presentation, and for all of those who wanted that before the session, yes, that's the updated slide with that information in one place. Another one was the post authentication, which also was used by Hafnium, for example. And today, just like you see, we have the vulnerability for compromising the admin's credentials. As well, there are multiple POCs on GitHub repos, which can reproduce that attack. Another one, another post authentication arbitrary file possibility, file write possibility, is also this defining how we could authenticate our Exchange servers to write files and based on the paths and configurations to, for example, compromise legitimate admin credentials. So based on that, we're able to also define this CVE as another example. So if we go to affected Exchange server versions, just like you see, we have multiple versions listed here. Microsoft says officially that Exchange 2003 and 07 weren't affected because they are today unsupported by Microsoft. So that's one perspective. Although recently, when you dig over the internet, you'll be able to get some information about Exchange 2007, which was still partially affected by that. At least those were some researchers' information. Officially, Exchange 2010, 13, 16, 19, all of those were affected, and Microsoft had to release patches in March, of course, to prepare us for those situations, for those attacks. Those patches were released in March. They are always newer ones. So like today, you have to double check what's the current version, what's the newest version of the patch, and which of those are affecting the stack which you have in your organization. So the simplest answer is patch to the newest one, of course, if you can, if you may have a chance. So regarding to other examples, Exchange Online, that was a question which I got, I think over LinkedIn as a private message. If you will be talking about this topic, will you mention Exchange Online? Well, today, Exchange Online isn't, at least officially, mentioned as a affected version because it's hosted by Microsoft. So they are doing the patching and they are hosting those servers internally. But we could imagine that if that CVE was exploited by different people, Microsoft was patching the first and the most important things. So Exchange servers, which were hosting the service for Exchange Online. So maybe, for example, for some time they were open to the communication, but we don't know it today. So that's why I did say the status as not affected, because I didn't find any information about the aspects and effects of that attack for Exchange Online. So today, if we have those versions and patches, just like you saw the FireEye article, all of them are mentioned as quite important because they are, or they could be affected. Microsoft has the patches, just basically try to apply them as quickly as you can. And for example, if I was doing a demo environment, which I hosted last week, and I save it over the night, when I woke up in the morning, it was already affected, so I had to revert all the VMs. So that's always happening. That's the current situation which we have over the today's day. And of course, if the server isn't patched, or even within the newest version of the image, still it needs patching. So also important. Few buzzwords, few hashtags which I just dumped. So Hafnium, Proxy Logon, DoCry, and China Chopper. China Chopper isn't the new one. It was seen like even in 2015. Although today with those attacks is also quite important to get the discovery done by tools, by scripts, or whatever you have. And basically those 3, 4 even hashtags were quite oftenly seen together as results in the search engine. So all the history and how it started to show up over the internet, just like you see, almost every month we had something new. So starting from October, DevCore and researchers which were doing that kind of a test for DevCore were sending information on the first bits of the code. Then the possible November of 2020 was the possible first exploitation when we first saw the first CV on the list. Then secondly, December and January, based on the timeframes, just like you see, Hafnium quite heavily interested in those perspectives. And at the same time, Hafnium was elevating the previously discovered code. And today it was modified multiple times, but still January the 1st started the whole information about attacks, possible vulnerabilities, and effects over the internet. So Microsoft did acknowledge that on the 6th of January, they were knowing that there's something happening, and they were officially stating that there's some kind of attack which is affecting Exchange servers. So just like you see, January, February, and March, and especially in March, it was exploding. So quite a lot was happening over March servers, which were then yet unpatched, but all of those POC codes were available over GitHub, especially the first reaction of Microsoft when Microsoft did delete one of the first repos of the web archive, which we had publicly available. So that spread quite heavily. And after March the 1st, even more attacks were happening. So with a small reference table, which I got from domaintools.com, that's a possible timeline which was related to those attacks, and especially Exchange affected servers. So with those, I have a map, for example, with this slide, which is from Palo Alto. This one shows a summary of servers which were discovered on the time between March 8th and 11th. And this one shows you, for example, how many servers were discovered as vulnerable, and of course, automatically unpatched. So that's one statistics. Another one, which is on the next slide, is from Asset. This one basically says that it was dumped from the Polish side, but I just simply wanted to leave the credits for them. It's information between the most spreaded, let's say, part of the timeline. So February, March, and we have amount of web shows dropped. So Asset and Asset tools were able to discover web shows dropped by that scale. And for example, just like you see, we have Poland here, Germany, and one of the biggest attacks, of course, was also Germany and America as well, so United States. So that's also another trigger which shows how it was looking like and how it was seen by organizations. What we could do and what we can have here. For example, we have some descriptions which were saved. Microsoft did even release a script which is listed here, which shows how we can prevent that, and I'll show it in a demo in a moment. Automatically, of course, other certs and other, let's say, advisory councils were releasing their code to help people and organizations to discover, first of all, what's happening. Secondly, how we can prevent it, and of course, build solutions based on those. So based on the tools and informations, we have the IOCs checking scripts. Then we have a list of IOCs for DRCRY, for example. So how we can check them and where to, first of all, add those. And based on those, we are able to discover what was happening over the infrastructure which we are monitoring. So that was first start of the information which we're able to get. And of course, if we go to attack details, in most cases, when we try to simulate Hafnium, for example, we had those parameters saved over the ASP. So just like you see here, we have JavaScript. And of course, if I will go to my sample code, just make it as a quick one. If you will follow up the links, that's an official repo, which I just even found today. So that's one. That's another one. And of course, the other example, which shows how Proxy Logon as an effect as an attack was working. So today, for example, if we go to see the code itself, within the code, just like you see, we have the libs, which are imported. And basically, at the end, we have the information about random shell names. One trick, which is today, previously, there was a well-known list of shells which were dropped. But starting from, I don't know, like maybe more or less mid of March, we were able to capture some customly or randomly generated names on the web shells dropped over Exchange servers. So within the organizations which are working servers, we also were preparing for that situation. But each day, the attacks were more sophisticated, and they were trying to even randomly generate the names for the endpoints and shells at the end. So the location of those was always the same. So just like you see, the shell path is listed here in the code, and all of those were all automatically dumped always to that location. So even the shell was randomly generated, it always landed here in the authentication part for Outlook Web Access. That's one. Secondly, the payload is listed here. And of course, based on the payload and the discoveries of the servers, we just simply had to add the IP of the server or the name of the server, and then the user email, which on that server is supposed to exist. Based on that, you have one example of the code. And for example, if we are going to this screenshot from the same repo, you'll be able to see that, for example, the server was, in this particular case, in version 2019. We were able to get its DN. We were able to get the server IDs. We were able to dump even information about the SIDs. So based on that, at the end, we were dropping the exactly virtual directory shell, and that shell was posted to the authentication folder of Exchange automatically. And of course, you were able to run the interactive shell remotely from that server if you wanted anytime. And of course, at the end, it was working as anti-authority system, and that's a publicly available repo which you can use to reproduce the code in effects, which I have right now on my servers. So that's listed here, and I'll of course paste the link to that as well. So that's another perspective of the attack details. Let's go back to the presentation. The next step was basically to point to capture some information about the local system which we're running on. Of course, the easiest way is to dump the information on the Exchange server or a file server which we have, or basically a domain controller. But the case is to trigger to dump the information from LSAS if it's not protected. And of course, if we are able to see the next step, proc dump, or basically anything to which is able to dump LSAS was seen as used by attackers. So for example, sometimes it could be proc dump, sometimes it could be a different tool, but basically it was targeting dump information from LSAS. The next step was basically to use 7-zip or any kind of other repacking solution like WinRAR and so on to pack it up and then send it to a CNC server. So if we went to see what was happening, and we have some code line here to find if we were affected or not. So for example, if you'll use Exchange PowerShell snap-ins, you are able to get the information about the mailboxes. And of course, another one was to use this PowerShell, for example, to see if we have TCP open shells, of course, reverse shells using our TCP connections to our Exchange servers. So there's another sample of the code which we're able to use to review that if we were affected or not. And of course, the another effect of it was trying to download, in most cases, PowerCat, but I'm just like you see, it's running the remote command from, in most cases, of course, PowerShell, just to do a download operation. In this particular case, the attack was, the step was trying to download the code based on the interactive session on the PowerShell from this GitHub repo. So in this particular case, the step was to basically download another tool to that server, which was already compromised. So that's another example. If the file was dumped on that server, it could be looking like that. Just like I said, the first examples, which were happening in March, were using fairly known codes for names, and those weren't randomized. But in this particular case, just like we see, the file name is quite obvious, and it was publicly available as a list of files as web shells. Today, it's just being randomized. What's the effect of the attack? Basically, one of the effects is the modification of the external URL. So just like you see, in this particular case, the external URL is being modified just to run the JScript and a function payload. Here's a zoom for that. And another example, which I have, is here. Those modifications could be a bit different. It depends on which stage you were attacked or based on which code you were affected. But still, the effect at the end was the same. External URL was modified, and then the web shell was being dumped by the attackers. So with this particular case, we had to always monitor specific locations. And for example, if I'm going back to my Exchange servers, and I have this one here, let's clear the screen and let's test this one. So for example, if I was running this code, just to see if Proxy Logon was seen on that server. The server is new, so it shouldn't be anything special, because yesterday I was cleaning up. So this one is clean, but I'm just like you see, we have multiple scripts which can be run to check if our server is affected by any kind of a part of the attack. And those were, let's show the part of the script. And those were basically trying to, in steps, to modify and check the well-known locations and well-known places for those logs and possible effects of the attack itself. So just like you see, this one is already present. So basically, my script says there's something strange about it, but it's a post effect of the test which I was doing on that machine. So that isn't very special at the end. If I will go to my next strip, which is today trying to check. This one is from Microsoft. This one is basically a script responsible for fixing the default configurations. So just like you see, I already applied the URL rewriting module. So I used the newest one, and basically when I was fixing my infrastructure after the attack, I just basically started to patch it. Although it was attacked, then I reverted the infrastructure again and used this script just to modify URL rewriting modules for IIS. And still, I'm keeping the Exchange in a closed environment, but I'm in the old version just to see what happens. So just like you see, all the scans are being done automatically by the tool. The tool is being downloaded from Microsoft GitHub official repo. So it's a live scan of the current situation on that server. So I'll just simply leave it here for a moment and see what happens in the so-called meantime. Still, the tools are helpful for checking the aspects of the attack. And just like you see, this one even has a check for dedicated parts of the attack, but it tries to download the newest modules directly from Microsoft. And we also seen some examples of the modifications of those scripts. So if you will find it in a different repo than Microsoft, please double check the code, because some modifications were already done to those as well. So it could be like EOMT version 1 or version 3, whatever it is. But those are populated over the internet right now. And just like you see, those could be also used in a different way or a different purpose than it was originally done by Microsoft. So that's also here. and the threat intelligence scanner is being downloaded. It's doing the scans in the background, so I'll just simply leave it here. But I'm just like you see, all the logs, all the locations which I just covered in the previous slide were also listed here, and this script goes to check that. Automatically, if you see the links and the commands which I have here, let's make it a bit bigger. Let's close it. So also, if we want to check any information about, for example, the authenticated users and configurations, one place, another one for 58. So the previously seen in the tool location for logging and the logs itself from the Exchange server. Of course, for 857, all the logs in the event log related to unified messaging, because that was also a DLL which was affected by the attack itself at the end. And of course, at the end, we have still the modifications for the virtual directories. And the effect of that is that that line, exactly. Those two lines which are trying to rewrite the modules, and they're trying to reconfigure the default virtual directories in IIS to apply redirections, first of all, to fix the default locations and fix the default names. So that's another part of the scripts which are happening. And this one's supposed to be done right now. So maybe too much of pressure on that. We'll park it for a moment, and we'll give it a try in a few minutes. So that's one of the perspectives which you are able to get and see in this particular case. Of course, if I'm going back to my servers and the aspects of the attack, just like I said, that's the effect of it as a modified web shell, which is at the end, for example, listed here as one of the steps in the modifications. Another quite important information is that you are able to get the CVEs, and of course, those locations, and for example, some code in PowerShell can be also used to check that. So just like I showed in a moment, I have a dedicated part of my configuration done by PowerShell scripts just to double check the configuration, states of it, and so on, to see what's the current status of those configurations as well, and where I can locate the logs. That's also here in the same slide. For the next part, which is happening in the background, the scan, which can be done, for example, today, if you don't have a tool for it and you are using scripts internally, that can be used, that can be done, for example, like in this particular example. So try to find any information about the logs in the logs location of Exchange servers. Exploitation can be detected by information saved over the logs of that server as well. Another example is 57. Of course, the service which was compromised, the unified messaging service. And if you want to search for that, we have even the same PowerShell command which I was showing just a moment ago to check that as well. Let's give it a try if it was able to finish. Okay, this one looks okay. I don't see any red information about the effects. We could go to this location just to double check. See the OMT summary, and if I have that, yeah, there's nothing suspicious here. Okay, great. So that's a clean server. But I'm just like you see, if you want to go through those each by each, because different steps of the attack could be seen on the servers, you can launch those commands as well, just to see if there's anything or was anything on that server as well. So that's another part. That's another scan. This one is also yeah, clean. And let's check this one as the last one. Yeah, okay. So just like you see, a clean server, open to the internet before the session, yet not affected by the attackers. Another example of a script which follows the steps and rewrites the configurations, of course, especially for that that part of the attack. So that's also an example which you see. Another CVE, another script, another PowerShell which can be done. And of course, one of the examples of Proxy Logon, how it could be looking like, the script which I showed you over the GitHub repo, then you simply point the server, add a email which is existing on that server. Effect of it is basically dropping the shell which is under that URL. If you copy it, you have access to it, for example, in this particular case through the browser. But if you will go to add this line, then you have a possible option to see who or in which context today that web shell is working on. So for example, in this particular case, if I will paste it, you'll see that the entity authority system is used by the server itself. So that's another part of the attack, which could be seen as an effect of it. Proxy Logon, there's a dedicated site event for proxylogon.com. Here we have another video which shows exactly the same part of the attack. I was having my Exchange compromise hunting dashboard clean. We can check if there's any kind of a change happening over that server. Let's try to check it right now. I've connected my infrastructure to Azure Sentinel just to have any kind of a visibility on what's happening. And I'm using Microsoft Defender for endpoint, but today it's just turned off, just to allow me to even simulate the attacks. That's one of the situations which we'll have. Just like you see, we have some security alerts which were seen on the client 6. Right now, we are able to see CVEs which I was downloading from that repo. All of those were found, and for example, just in this particular case, you see the exploit which was identified. And what is quite important, it is automatically identified by Microsoft Defender as well. So that's another example. If I will go to my Sentinel, let's go to my demo environment. Let's see if we're able to get anything right now. Okay. I was using a connected dashboard. Yep, that's the one. And if I will run the dashboard, it tries to get the server. I didn't see any UM service, so Unified Messaging Service attacks on that server yet. But I do see a lot of web shells which were dropped yesterday and even today before the session. 2.7 is exposed to the internet. So this is the only workstation which is today available from the internet. Just like you see, we see the web shells which were captured, and each time it's a custom, you will choose random name. So for example, you'll be able to get those information as well. All of those attacks were in some part blocked by Microsoft Defender as well. So that's why you won't see any kind of other perspectives of those attacks. Let's see Hafnium. Yeah, Hafnium was also blocked, so it isn't able to go further with the investigations. Although if I will go back to this one, let's refresh it. That's action taken. Yeah, the previous infrastructure which I had, the newest one which is here, it also has the information about the attack itself, and you are able to get the information that there was even a newer version of the same attack done in Go. So if I will go to investigate, you see the graph that the action was quite a small one because the client version 6 was the used version of the infrastructure to leverage the attack. But in the same time, just like you see, we have the graph for it. And if you have all the events related to that, yeah, that's a query which actually shows you what was taken as an action. And for example, you'll see that it's all automatically discovered by the infrastructure. So paths, locations, logs, all the activities which you are able to capture are supposed to be detected today. We have some examples of queries which we could use in different tools. I'm giving just you a small glimpse into Azure Sentinel possibilities, just to show you that it also was investigated and blocked automatically by my Connect infrastructure. So that's another one. And of course, if you go to different details over the incident link, you get more details about the attack itself. So let's pause here. Let's go back to the slides. So paths and web shells, just like I said, customly today, previously quite well known. Well-observed web shells were in those locations. So basically, we're trying to attack IIS and then Exchange, or Exchange and IIS. It depends from which perspective you are looking at it. Other signs which were showing that we were attacked or could be attacked: suspicious zip files, RAR files, and basically packers, which were dumping information in program data, because those were commonly seen. Although at the end, we were able to monitor also paths for LSAS dumps on Windows 10, for example, root, tools which were being tried to download over the web expressions for PowerShells are listed also here. Another perspective is the China Chopper actions which were happening. That's a list which I just copied from one of the GitHub repos. It's even longer, but I just simply didn't want to show you everything. Here we have the information which is updated almost every day about newly seen aspects of that attack, as well as for China Chopper. And the one which actually came today in the morning, at least for me, is the Microsoft Exchange deserialization. So that's why the smiley is explained, because those attacks are happening almost every day, every week. So today, the newest version is basically the case, which I've seen it like 5 hours ago, and it goes to the meeting pool 100 deserialization, and we are able to dump shellcode and then dump whatever we want on that server based on, for example, the code which we have here. And there's a even recorded video for a demo for that. So if I will switch back to my presentation. On time. And based on that, you have the yeah, exactly, the shell which is today used for the poll. Successful, we have the connection account is the system, and we are able to dump files remotely over that shell. So if you go to Exchange server, you'll be able to see, for example, that Exchange was used. And if you go to the local drive, you'll see that the file from the demo was dumped just in seconds. So based on those, of course, the attacks are happening. They will be happening. We're supposed to be prepared, or we're supposed to think about building the threat landscape for that. Secondly, preparing our fences and protection. And of course, in the same time, there's another page which I found as an example of tagged keywords used for attacks. And just like you see, a list of frequently cited URLs, that's quite yeah, that's quite big if you are relating to only one possible attack vector and repos of copies of that code as well. So all of those are quite changing rapidly. And just like I said, this one just came to me in the morning. I just simply was reviewing the Twitter handle and some private information which I got before the session. So thanks for that. And Jim was the owner of it. So going further with the summaries and information, of course, a lot of organizations happen to help each other. There are even services provided by CISA, which can check your email. Based on that, they will say that you seem vulnerable or not. Afterwards, you are able to trust some tools. In this particular case, Microsoft Defender from this particular version automatically has definitions for those specific types of attacks, and it shows them and blocks them automatically. Of course, if you go to the cloud perspective of the tool itself, so Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, with the dedicated subscription, it shows you the threat vectors, attacks, information, how it was discovered. So that's my MX server, which shows the possible aspects of the attack itself. So based on that, we have multiple things which we have to care about. Of course, the session could be even lasting longer, but we have a dedicated part of our time in this particular slot. So ramping up and going to the last slide. Thank you for your attention. Hopefully you did get some glimpse of what was happening to the exchange, because there's multiple information, multiple sources, and multiple even codes, which just like you saw over repo, over GitHub repos. And yeah, have a wonderful day. And I'm giving back the voice to the studio. So guys.